Here's what I think. I think that regardless of what Charlie Kaufman may think of film critics in general, me in particular, I think he's a genius. Okay, I absolutely love Being John Malkovich. Adaptation, I think, is terrific, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, for which he also had an Oscar alongside a BAFTA, is one of my favourite movies. I think it's great. It is true that he's fared less well as a director. I mean, Synecdoche in New York was a financial flop. I know some critics absolutely love it. Pete Bradshaw, who I admire very much, thinks it's a masterpiece. I didn't. I didn't like it, and I think that stung him. I'm surprised that he cares what I thought about it, but I think for a long time because that film polarized critics and didn't do well. And hey, if you make something and put your heart and soul into it, and people don't absolutely love it, then people always tend to remember the bad reviews rather than the good ones. Anomalisa, was nominated for an Oscar, still financially, effectively flopped because it ended up taking less than it cost. We won't know about, I'm thinking of ending things because it's on Netflix, and obviously you don't get audience figures from this. But just to kind of to recap, the story is a young couple, Jesse Plemons, Jesse Buckley. They're on a trip to meet his parents. The whole thing is kind of framed within her anxieties about the relationship, which she is thinking of ending, which is a phrase that can mean a whole bunch of things. They get to the farmhouse. Tony Collette, David Thewlis are the mom and dad. Their age is changing, details are changing. All around them, things are changing. So now, if you're a genre fan, this should flag up fairly clearly what's going on. I actually don't think this is interesting as a kind of comparison to Tenet. I don't think the plot is that hard to follow. The question is more not do we understand it, but do we care? In the case of the Ian Reid short source novel, which I have read, the answer is yes, not least because I mean basically it is Twilight Zone with A levels, and if you're familiar with things like It's Good Life, you'll sort of know where the story's going. But the whole of the last act of the novel is this really page turning stream of consciousness thing, which is inflected by horror, genre horror, slasher horror, and you really do find yourself kind of breathlessly reading it. In the case of there's a comparison I think between that novel and the Alex Garland thing, Coma. In the case of the film, it doesn't do that. The sort of the trashy element, which I like, is thrown out in favor of something which is much more sort of somber, much more adventurous in terms of song and dance. It turns the phrase that I was using. It kind of turns a pot boiler into a chin stroker, and it's a movie that ends up sort of being aimed at your intellect rather than your heart. And the thing with the novel was it's visceral. It works on an emotional level. The film, which has many things to admire, not least Jessie Buckley's performance, is almost entirely cerebral. And it's almost the opposite of what happens in adaptation when you get to the ending and your thriller ending, great results. This is kind of goes completely the other way. And I think it's inventive and adventurous. I also think it's kind of impenetrable and at times kind of infuriating because at times it plays like an audiobook with pictures more than it does like a movie. I mean, it's interesting that Kaufman obviously has worked in sound plays. He talked about that when he was talking about Anomalisa. I think it's a credit to Buckley that she manages to breathe such human life into what is essentially a cipher role. And I think that if I'm honest about it, I mean, I wish I liked it more because I do think he's great. I think he's got, I think he's a genius. I haven't loved one of his films for quite a while, and I think how much I love Eternal Sunshine. I don't get that. What I get with this is okay, yeah, I can see that, and I think that thing with the last act, well, that's an adventurous way to do it. Does it grip me? No. Do I think that I'm doing your thing now, but interviewing myself? I
Yeah, don't
suspect
mind
that
me.
either the people who like it will really love it. It's already got many great critical reviews. I think that for whatever he thinks about film critics, Charlie Kaufman has become a film critic's darling. I'm not sure if the film connects on a personal level. From my point of view, it didn't. I take no pleasure in saying that because I keep saying, no matter what he thinks of me, I think he's a really, really talented filmmaker. But I don't. I've lost the emotional engagement, and I think that huge plaudits to Jessie Buckley for basically taking something which is a hmm, yes, movie and giving it some heart rather than just art.
Yeah, whatever. It's intensely annoying Jessie Buckley isn't, which is why it was great to talk to her,
Yeah,
and
she is great.
she
She is
is
great in everything.
she's fantastic, but I found it just so self-indulgent. And she made a reference to the long scene before you get to the farmhouse where Tony Collette and David Thewlis have prepared this nightmarish meal with never-ending supply of carrots. Which, listening back to that interview, I think that's a clue as to what's going on, and it's not really a continuity error. Anyway, there's a long, incredibly long section where she and Jesse Plemons are just talking
Yeah.
forever, and it's as though you know Charlie might have thought it was clever, but I thought I had just I was so glad that they arrived at the nightmare meal because I'd almost lost interest at that point. This is quite early on in the
Yeah.
film. I found it totally self-indulgent. I felt as though they did Charlie Kavan didn't care what I thought, and which is almost certainly true. And he was just making a film for himself. That's what I thought.
Well, hey, one thing I will
And you
say.
can't be a genius. I'm sorry to interrupt. You can't be a
Sorry.
genius if you have, a couple of really good films, but don't you have to be more consistent if you're
Well,
actually going to be a
I've said this
genius?
before. I think he's a better writer than he is director, and I think he is at his best when his writing is mediated by somebody else, whether it's Spike Jonze or Michel Gondry. Incidentally, it's very interesting stuff by Michel Gondry on what he had to do with the script for Eternal Sunshine to make it work the way he did. I don't care. I think if you do something that brilliant once, I'll forgive you pretty much everything. But I didn't. This didn't wow me, and I said it's been a long time since I loved one of his films in the way that I loved Eternal Sunshine. The first thing I was going to say is the thing about Netflix is Netflix allow people to make exactly the film they want to make, and that is both a great thing and a bad thing. That's why we have Duncan Jones's Mute, which I know a lot of people couldn't get on with, but I think that's the film he wanted to make. This looks to me like the film that Charlie Kaufman wanted to make, for better or worse.